Entitled behavior escalates quickly during stressful situations, but most people never imagine their outbursts could turn deadly. In this video, we're examining 6 disturbing cases where Karen-like behavior led to fatal consequences. Each incident happened during moments of confrontation so common, you've probably witnessed similar scenes yourself. It was December 18, 2016, at a big box retail store in suburban Columbus, Ohio. The holiday rush had created overcrowded aisles and extended checkout lines throughout the facility. What started as a dispute over the last gaming device would end with a fatal collision with a metal display. Linda Harrington was 47 years old and worked part-time as an office assistant. She lived alone and had no spouse or children. Co-workers later described her as someone who spent most of her free time on solitary routines, including video games, which had become a regular form of distraction after long workdays. Store records showed a pattern of prior complaints in which Linda frequently challenged policies and demanded managerial intervention when denied exceptions. Linda arrived during peak holiday hours and waded through long checkout and electronics lines. Witnesses later reported that she grew increasingly frustrated as other customers were served ahead of her. By the time she reached the counter, the promotional gaming device had sold out moments earlier. Staff offered to check nearby locations and later attempted to de-escalate by offering a discount, but Linda rejected both, accusing employees of withholding stock and insisting the item be taken from the customer who obtained the final unit. After being told the item was no longer available and rejecting alternative options, Linda remained in the electronics area, continuing to argue with staff as other customers gathered nearby. Store employees attempted to move the situation away from the counter to reduce disruption. As staff began preparing to involve security, Linda climbed onto a nearby motorized shopping cart, using it to continue the confrontation while moving through the store rather than leaving the area. An employee immediately warned that the equipment was intended for seated use only and could not be operated while standing. Linda ignored the instruction and refused to dismount, as multiple staff members explained that misuse violated store safety rules. She proceeded down the main aisle while standing upright, dismissing posted warning signage and continuing despite employees following her and preparing to intervene. The cart struck a recently mopped area near the pharmacy section, where bright yellow warning cones and wet floor signs were prominently displayed. Linda had driven directly through the marked area while shouting that the store was creating obstacles to harass customers. The wheels lost traction on the slick surface, causing the cart to veer sideways and tip over. Linda was thrown forward with significant momentum, striking her head and upper torso against a metal end cap display. Store employees immediately called for emergency assistance while attempting to provide first aid. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes and transported her to a general hospital, where trauma surgeons attempted resuscitation for over 2 hours. She was pronounced dead later that day, after doctors were unable to control severe intracranial pressure caused by blunt force head trauma. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be catastrophic head and cervical spine injuries, including skull fractures and internal brain hemorrhaging. Following the incident, the store closed the affected section and cooperated fully with responding authorities. Employees who had attempted to intervene provided statements, and security footage documenting the escalation and collision was reviewed as part of the investigation. The case was ultimately classified as an accidental death resulting from repeated safety violations. It was October 23, 2019, in the hills outside Santa Rosa, California, during the peak of wildfire season. Red flag warnings were in effect across the region due to extreme winds and critically low humidity. Emergency alerts warned residents that conditions could allow a small fire to spread uncontrollably within minutes. Margaret Sullivan was 51 years old and worked as a freelance bookkeeper from her hillside home. She had lived on the property for over a decade and frequently told neighbors that her experience made her better informed than emergency officials. She believed wildfires were exaggerated by authorities and often claimed that most evacuations were unnecessary panic responses. In online forums and neighborhood groups, Margaret repeatedly argued that wind forecasts were unreliable and that wildfire behavior was predictable if someone understood the terrain. Margaret also believed she had developed her own wildfire protection method. She told others that sealing doors, covering vents, and maintaining what she claimed was a controlled airflow environment inside the home could prevent smoke infiltration and heat buildup. She had reinforced her windows with reflective insulation and claimed the material would deflect radiant heat. These beliefs were not supported by fire science, but Margaret considered them proven through personal research and past survival during earlier fire seasons. When a mandatory evacuation order was issued that afternoon, emergency personnel began clearing the hillside neighborhoods. Responders went door to door advising residents to leave immediately. Margaret refused evacuation assistance and declined transportation offers. She stated that leaving would expose her home to looting and insisted that staying put was safer than evacuating into what she described as chaotic road conditions. As winds intensified throughout the afternoon, smoke became visible along the ridgeline. Ash began settling on nearby properties, and visibility dropped. Neighbors reported seeing Margaret moving items inside her home, rather than preparing to leave. Emergency responders documented multiple attempts to persuade her to evacuate, but she remained firm in her belief that her preparations were sufficient. By early evening, the fire advanced rapidly toward the neighborhood. Driven by gusts reaching severe speeds, responders were forced to withdraw as conditions became too dangerous. The last confirmed sighting of Margaret was shortly before emergency vehicles exited the area, with flames already visible above the ridgeline behind her property. Within minutes, the fire reached her home. Extreme winds carried embers ahead of the flame front, igniting dry vegetation surrounding the structure. The home was quickly overwhelmed. Fire crews were unable to return due to downed power lines, active explosions from nearby propane tanks, and zero visibility caused by smoke. Margaret's remains were located several days later during damage assessment operations. The medical examiner determined that she died from smoke inhalation and thermal injuries consistent with wildfire exposure. Her home was completely destroyed. Following the incident, the case was referenced in emergency response reviews as an example of how false confidence, unsupported beliefs, and refusal to evacuate can turn survivable situations into fatal outcomes. It was August 23, 2017, on Interstate 80 near Reno, Nevada, during peak afternoon traffic. Temperatures reached 98 degrees Fahrenheit under clear skies. A construction project along the highway had narrowed the shoulder and compressed traffic into fewer lanes, creating limited room for error in an area already prone to vehicle breakdowns due to steep grades and heat stress. Denise Keller was 49 years old and worked as a real estate assistant for a property management company in Carson City. Co-workers later described her as someone who frequently challenged instructions from supervisors and contractors, particularly when advice came from people she believed were less experienced. Company records documented prior disputes in which Denise dismissed safety guidance and attempted to override professional recommendations during property inspections. On the afternoon of the incident, Denise's 2003 Honda Civic overheated while climbing a long grade outside Reno. She pulled onto the narrow shoulder approximately 200 yards before a construction merge zone, where traffic slowed abruptly and vehicles shifted lanes with limited visibility. The reduced shoulder width left little space between her vehicle, the guardrail, and passing traffic. A highway patrol officer arrived within minutes after receiving the breakdown report. A tow truck driver already staged nearby due to construction later reported that Denise immediately resisted assistance. Witnesses noted that she questioned the officer's competence after hearing his accent and declined repeated offers to move farther from traffic or wait inside a patrol vehicle while arrangements were made to clear the disabled car. The officer attempted to explain the risks of remaining on the shoulder in a construction corridor, citing the limited clearance and the likelihood of passing vehicles drifting toward the shoulder as drivers focused on merging traffic ahead. Witnesses reported that Denise openly questioned the officer's competence, repeatedly referencing his accent and background as reasons she did not trust his instructions. She dismissed the warnings and remained near the driver's side of her vehicle, refusing to follow guidance she believed came from someone unqualified to advise her. As traffic density increased, vehicles passed within feet of the disabled car. The officer continued urging Denise to step behind the guardrail, but she refused and stayed in the narrow gap between her vehicle and the barrier. The tow truck driver later reported growing concern, as heavy trucks began moving through the merge area at reduced but uneven speeds, while Denise remained exposed and uncooperative. At approximately 3:47 p.m., a commercial truck hauling construction materials approached the breakdown location. The driver later told investigators that his attention was focused on merging traffic ahead and the narrowing lane configuration. As the truck passed the disabled vehicle, its right mirror assembly clipped the Honda Civic, forcing the car sideways. The sudden movement pinned Denise between the vehicle and the guardrail. She was thrown violently against the metal barrier, sustaining catastrophic injuries. The patrol officer immediately initiated emergency medical care while requesting advanced life support. Denise was transported to a regional medical center where trauma teams attempted surgical intervention. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The coroner determined the cause of death to be massive internal injuries resulting from blunt force trauma. The incident was later incorporated into regional highway safety training materials, emphasizing the dangers of refusing professional assistance and remaining exposed during roadside emergencies in active traffic zones. It was November 12, 2018, on Pennsylvania state game lands in northern Pennsylvania during the peak of deer hunting season. Weather conditions were clear with temperatures in the low 40s. The area was popular among hunters due to its dense deer population and well-maintained trail system with clearly marked boundaries. A property dispute would escalate into a fatal firearms accident when an angry confrontation turned physical. Sharon Pike, 55, had recently retired from her position as a retail manager at a regional department store chain. Neighbors described her to investigators as frequently disputing property boundaries in her rural community, often confronting hikers and hunters whom she believed were trespassing. Her property bordered the state game lands, creating ongoing confusion about exact boundary lines despite posted signage. Sharon had a documented history of confronting outdoor enthusiasts in the area, including a 2016 incident where she called police on a family of hikers using a public trail. Local records showed multiple complaints filed by Sharon against the State Parks Department regarding boundary maintenance and signage placement. That morning, a group of 4 licensed hunters had established positions in accordance with state regulations, approximately 150 yards from the nearest property boundary. They possessed all required permits and safety equipment. The group included 2 experienced hunters who had been using the area for over a decade without previous incidents. Sharon approached the group around 10:30 a.m. and accused them of trespassing on what she believed was private property adjacent to her land. A hunter who witnessed the initial confrontation reported Sharon making accusations about their positioning and demanding they leave the area immediately. The hunters attempted to show her their permits and explain the public land designation using maps and GPS coordinates. Despite explanations about the public land status and proper boundary markers, Sharon became increasingly agitated and stepped inside the marked safety perimeter that hunters had established around their position. State hunting regulations require maintaining safe distances and clear sight lines, which Sharon's presence disrupted, according to witness statements. Sharon grabbed a rifle from one of the hunters while attempting to demonstrate what she considered unsafe positioning. The rifle, a .30-06 bolt-action hunting rifle, was loaded and ready for hunting use. Unfamiliar with firearm handling procedures, Sharon placed her finger inside the trigger guard while pointing the weapon in an unsafe direction. The rifle discharged immediately, striking Sharon in the upper torso. The hunters immediately called for emergency assistance while attempting to provide first aid using their basic wilderness medical supplies. The remote location required emergency responders to access the area using all-terrain vehicles, creating a 25-minute response time. Emergency medical technicians attempted advanced trauma care but pronounced Sharon dead at the scene. The coroner's report cited a single gunshot wound to the chest, with damage to major organs and major blood vessels as the cause of death, with rapid blood loss preventing survival. Despite immediate medical intervention, based on available evidence, investigators ruled the death accidental, citing improper handling of a loaded weapon by someone unfamiliar with basic firearm safety protocols. It was June 18, 2016, on Interstate 5 outside Redding, California, during moderate afternoon traffic. Weather conditions were clear with temperatures in the mid-80s and posted speed limits of 70 miles per hour. The highway section featured gentle curves and good visibility, with light construction work causing occasional lane restrictions. An aggressive driving incident would end in a high-speed rollover when road rage spiraled completely out of control. Pamela Brooks, 44, worked as a regional sales representative for a medical equipment company, requiring extensive highway travel throughout Northern California. Co-workers described her to investigators as having aggressive driving habits and particular intolerance toward motorcyclists, often expressing frustration about their lane positioning. Pamela had a record of prior traffic violations tied to aggressive driving behavior. Investigators later confirmed that she had previously been cited for following too closely and making unsafe lane changes. Company records also showed repeated complaints from clients about late arrivals to appointments, often attributed to traffic delays. GPS data reviewed after the crash indicated a consistent pattern of speeding during business travel. That afternoon, Pamela was driving her company vehicle northbound toward a client meeting in Oregon. Traffic was moving at normal speeds, with occasional slowdowns due to construction zones. A motorcyclist traveling in the same direction was maintaining legal positioning in the right lane, following traffic laws regarding lane usage and speed limits. The rider, a 34-year-old construction worker commuting home from a job site, was wearing proper safety equipment and operating a properly registered motorcycle. A witness who was driving from another vehicle claimed Pamela's sedan approaching the motorcycle from behind at high speed, then beginning to tailgate at an unsafe distance. The footage captures her vehicle weaving between lanes while honking repeatedly and making gestures toward the motorcyclist. Other drivers began changing lanes to avoid the erratic behavior. Pamela accelerated past the motorcycle, then swerved back into the right lane and attempted to block the rider's forward progress by reducing speed and positioning her vehicle to prevent lane changes. The motorcyclist maintained a safe following distance and signaled for the next exit, successfully leaving the highway at the Cottonwood exit without incident. Despite the motorcyclist's departure, Pamela continued driving erratically, weaving between lanes and exceeding posted speed limits. Traffic cameras positioned at regular intervals captured her vehicle traveling at excessive speeds with aggressive lane changes that forced other drivers to brake suddenly. At approximately 3:15 p.m., while attempting to pass a slower vehicle in the left lane, Pamela lost control during a lane change maneuver. Skid marks later analyzed by accident reconstruction specialists indicated she was traveling well above the speed limit when her vehicle began to slide sideways. Her sedan struck the concrete median barrier at an angle, causing it to roll multiple times. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes and found Pamela trapped in the severely damaged vehicle. Firefighters used hydraulic extraction equipment to remove her from the wreckage. Due to the severity of her injuries and the remote location, she was transported by helicopter to a trauma center in Redding. She was pronounced dead following unsuccessful surgical intervention. The coroner's report cited multiple traumatic injuries consistent with high-speed rollover impact as the cause of death, including severe head trauma, chest injuries, and internal bleeding. Based on available evidence, investigators determined that excessive speed and aggressive driving were the primary contributing factors. It was September 14, 2018, at a private wildlife sanctuary in the Florida Panhandle, specializing in rehabilitated but non-domesticated large predators. The 40-acre facility housed rescued animals under controlled conditions, with safety protocols developed over more than a decade of operation. A guided tour would turn deadly when repeated safety warnings were dismissed and physical barriers were breached. Elaine Porter, 58, was a retired travel agent from Pensacola who had recently begun volunteering with animal welfare groups. Investigators later learned she had a history of ignoring safety guidance at animal facilities, including prior warnings for entering restricted areas. Staff records and tour guides noted repeated boundary violations and a tendency to approach enclosures too closely. The sanctuary offered guided educational tours on weekends, led by trained staff with experience in animal behavior and safety. Groups were limited to 12 participants and received mandatory safety briefings emphasizing strict distance rules. That afternoon's group included 8 adults and 4 children. The guide, a wildlife biologist, repeatedly stressed that rehabilitated animals remained wild and that barriers existed solely for visitor protection. During the tour of the large cat section, staff repeatedly instructed all guests to remain behind established barriers positioned 6 feet from enclosure fencing. The barriers consisted of wooden railings designed to maintain safe distances while allowing clear viewing of the animals. Warning signs posted every 10 feet reinforced the importance of staying behind designated lines. The tour guide reported that Elaine stepped past the barrier, despite multiple verbal warnings, and approached the enclosure housing the rehabilitated panther. Other tour participants called for Elaine to return to the safe area, as staff members immediately moved toward her position, instructing her to step back slowly. Witnesses reported that Elaine leaned past the safety barrier and reached through a supervised viewing opening in the double-fenced enclosure system. The opening was designed for educational observation only, positioned at shoulder height, and not intended for physical contact with the animals. Elaine had extended her arm through the opening despite clear warning signage. The panther, a 120-pound male with natural predatory instincts intact despite rehabilitation, reacted defensively to the unexpected contact and attacked through the barrier opening. The animal's bite caused immediate severe vascular damage before staff could safely separate the animal using long-handled tools and emergency procedures. Emergency responders arrived within 12 minutes and found Elaine with severe lacerations to her arm and shoulder area. Advanced trauma care was initiated, including hemorrhage control and airway management. She was transported by helicopter to a hospital in Pensacola, where trauma surgeons attempted emergency surgery. Elaine was pronounced dead during surgery following unsuccessful attempts to control massive blood loss. The coroner's report cited severe lacerations and exsanguination from bite wounds as the cause of death, with damage to major blood vessels preventing survival, despite rapid medical intervention. Authorities later stated that the facility's established safety protocols were in place and that staff actions were consistent with those procedures. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.